I'm Julie Goodwin, and today I'm going to show you how to make a chicken stroganoff. So this is a bit of a riff on one of my favourite things that my nan used to cook, which was beef stroganoff. It was probably the most exotic thing she ever made in her kitchen. It actually has a bit of spice in it, a bit different to the meat and three veg that she quite often cooked. So the first thing I'm going to do is make a flour mixture to coat the chicken with. So about 1/4 cup of plain flour, a couple of teaspoons of sweet paprika, about 1/2 teaspoon of white pepper, and about the same of salt. Just mix that together, and that's going to coat the chicken, and the flour in it will help the sauce to thicken up nicely. But before I cut up the chicken, I'm going to chop up my mushrooms and my garlic, because once I've used the board to chop chicken, I've kind of got to wash the whole kitchen down before I can chop veggies. So I'm going to prep these things first. So I'm just going to slice those mushrooms up reasonably fine. You don't have to worry too much. With mushrooms, I would never peel little mushrooms like this, and if they've got any visible sort of dirt from being grown, I just brush that off or wipe it off with a bit of paper towel. But I would never wash mushrooms because they're so absorbent, they take all that water in, and then what needs to happen is it's got to cook back out. So it takes them a lot longer to sort of cook to where they're supposed to be. And little tender ones like this don't need to be peeled. You can put the garlic through a crusher, it's either or. I tend to chop it instead of putting it through a crusher because it never got washed up properly. So the boys would wash up and I'd go to use it the next time. It still had garlic in it from the time before, so I just chop it now. So now I'm just going to slice the chicken into nice thin strips because we want it to cook relatively quickly in the pan. The reason I use chicken thigh is because it's a much more forgiving cut of meat than chicken breast. If you wanted to use chicken breast, you could, but it dries out so quickly, and I find that anything that needs to simmer, chicken thigh is a much better cut, and you can reheat it as well and it won't dry out. This is just a much nicer cut for this dish. I'm going to toss the chicken in that flour mixture, and this not only seasons the chicken but it adds the sort of thickening agent for the sauce. Once you've tossed that quite thoroughly, most of that flour will be taken up into the moisture on the outside of the chicken. So a good splash of oil into the pan. So I want to make sure that's nice and hot, and then I'm just going to put in around about half of this. If you put too much in all at once, what happens is the pan cools down too quickly, and instead of browning, which is where you get all that beautiful flavour, it kind of stews and releases its juices, and it's just not as tasty at the end. So generally I like to leave the chicken alone and just flip it over when it's got a bit of colour on it. You could stir fry it if you like, but I just find you get a quicker result and better colour if you kind of leave it alone for a minute and then turn it over. I'll give it another moment on that side, and then I'm ready to take that out and do the next batch. It doesn't have to cook all the way through at this stage because it will simmer in the sauce a little bit later. What we're looking for here is just that colour, that flavour. Back when I was growing up, lamb was the cheap meat. Certainly when my mum was growing up, lamb was very much the cheap meat, but nowadays it's chicken. So this is traditionally done with beef, but this is just a bit more economical, and we're also concerned with the budget at the moment. Everything's so expensive, and when you bulk things up with vegetables, that makes it cheaper as well. So I'm just going to saute the mushrooms. What needs to happen with mushrooms is you start cooking them and they kind of wilt and release a bit of fluid. What needs to happen is that fluid's got to then evaporate and they start to turn golden, and that's where you get the really beautiful flavour come out in them. So I'm just going to saute them for a few minutes until I get that golden colour starting to happen, and that tastes a lot nicer than just those sort of lint grey mushrooms. If I toss the garlic in, I just give it about a minute so that the garlic sort of softens down and does that thing where it goes, you know, fragrant and translucent, and then we can crack on with the sauce. So into that I add 1/4 cup of tomato paste, which is 3 good tablespoons, Australian tablespoons, 20ml kind. Most Australian recipes, a tablespoon is 20ml, but in American recipes a tablespoon is 15ml. So be aware of what recipe you're using and be aware of what size tablespoon you've got. it can muck you up if it's an important measurement in the recipe. So I just give that a moment to cook, and then into that I'm going to add some stock, a little bit of stock, a little bit of mustard, a couple of tablespoons of Worcester sauce. So I'm just going to do that by eye to start with and then by taste a bit later, and 300 mils of sour cream. So that's one little container of sour cream. I'm going to mix all that together, and this is smelling amazing. And now I'm just going to put the chicken back into the pan, and remembering that that's got the flour on it that will thicken this sauce up a little bit more. And you add that in with any juices that might have accumulated in that dish. Then we're just going to let that simmer for a few minutes until that chicken cooks all the way through. I'm just going to taste a little bit of that sauce and make sure it doesn't need any more Worcester, if you love the flavour of that, or a little bit more salt. I don't think that needs a thing. So that is cooked. It's beautiful, rich, delicious. All I would do at home is put some roughly chopped continental parsley or flat leaf parsley over the top and serve it to the table in the pan. Chicken stroganoff with a bit of buttery pasta and some green beans is a beautiful, simple weeknight dinner.